Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. All eyes on Utah starting tomorrow, as for the first time, members of Charlie Kirk's family will be in that courtroom with the defendant Tyler Robinson as the 5-day preliminary hearing set to begin, as prosecutors seeking the death penalty will argue that the man charged in the killing of the conservative activist should stand trial for murder. This coming in from the New York Post, as Erika Kirk set to face her husband's accused killer, Tyler Robinson, in court for the first major test of evidence. Let's be joined right now here on Live Now from Fox by criminal defense attorney Dwane Cates. Dwane, thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a 5-day preliminary hearing. What could we expect? Evidence will be included. What should we be keeping our eyes out for this week?
Well, they're going to put on almost all the evidence they have, but it's going to be truncated. They get to hearsay things in. So instead of Tyler Robinson's roommate coming in and testifying, an officer is going to testify about what Tyler Robinson's roommate stated. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of that. That shortens the proceeding, and it's a shortened proceeding because all they really have to do is show probable cause, which is a really low bar. It's that he should be held to account for this, that there's some evidence that he did it, and there's enough evidence to go forward. It's not a conviction. It's not a trial. They're not going to do everything. They're going to put on the forensics. They're going to put on, their expert witnesses. They're going to show video clips. A 5-day preliminary hearing is a long preliminary hearing.
And this is not the trial yet, but it feels somewhat similar. How much could this be a benefit for the defense to see what the prosecution will lay out?
Well, it's always a benefit to the defense, because they get a preview of what the state's case is going to be and how they're going to present it and how the witnesses present and whether they're good witnesses or bad witnesses. Now, a lot of times, especially in my jurisdiction, these things go to grand juries, which are done in secret with a prosecutor and a cop. Okay. And they don't get to put public evidence on publicly. I think it's a good thing that this evidence is going to come in publicly. I think it will it may quell some of the conspiracy theorists rumors that are going around, but we'll see. Let's see what the evidence is.
Yeah, that is so very true, and they do know that this will be live streamed, so it will be all out there in the public. I also want to ask you about some of the key pieces of evidence that we might see, as authorities have said DNA consistent with Robinson was found on the trigger of the rifle used to kill Kirk, the fired cartridge casing, and 2 unfired cartridges, and a towel used to wrap the rifle. How key might be DNA, especially in this pretrial motion?
DNA is going to be really important. I mean, if Tyler Robinson's DNA is on the trigger, now they always say consistent with, because it comes out in statistics. They will never say it is absolutely on there. They'll say there's 1 in 4 billion chance that it's somebody other than Tyler Robinson, is how they'll express it. But the DNA evidence will be powerful, and if the ballistics match the bullet and everything that happened, and then his DNA is on the trigger, that's clearly enough for probable cause. Again, there's always ways to challenge it. There's always stuff you can do, but that's pretty damning.
And we also know that there'll be conversations around the death penalty. And in Utah, it's only when a crime has aggravating circumstances. As prosecutors will argue, Robinson's case that Kirk's shooting endangered others in attendance. We do know that this was very well attended. There were plenty of people there. How do they prove that? How much weight does the prosecution try to move with putting the death penalty on the line?
Well, I mean, their proof is the video of the assassination. I mean, there are people all over. There's people in front of him. There's people behind him. There's people on each side of him. So it is a possibility that somebody else, other than the intended target, could have gotten hit. So I don't know if that's enough for the death penalty in Utah or not. But just the fact that it was a pre-planned, aggravated murder of somebody that was a high-profile person in public, I think, they may get the death penalty.
What is the defense's role in this in this preliminary hearing? Will they have an opportunity to cross-examine some of the witnesses? Do they want to keep things close to the vest so they don't show their kind of game plan, their strategy too much too?
you know, they've got to present pretty much everything that they can. I mean, if this is a death penalty case, it's going to be scrutinized for years and years and years to come. And so they need to do absolutely everything that they can at every single stage. Okay, so there's no sandbagging in death penalty cases. You got to come out with with what you have going on at every stage. Otherwise, if he's convicted, then he can say, well, geez, my attorneys, were defective. They didn't do this at the preliminary hearing, and they should have.
That is a very good point. And this is a very high profile case. Even though this isn't the actual trial, it may feel like this. And we do know the widow of Charlie Kirk, Erika Kirk, will be in attendance, as well as potentially Charlie Kirk's family. And we also know recently that they were held in contempt, the prosecutor, for publicly stating some of what's going on in this case. How much is the judge walking a fine line with all the eyeballs on it, with all the potentially security around this case?
Oh, it's going to be it's a big deal. I mean, the judge has got to be really careful to make sure there's not even the hint of impropriety on his part, whether or not it's admonishing witnesses or victims or anybody in the courtroom. Got to establish control of the courtroom, okay, and you have to go from there.
And I want to ask, because we do know that this is all publicly out there, this will be live streamed, we will have to go eventually and pick a jury for this case. Do you think there's any concern in their eyes that someone that potentially could be above the jury pool will be watching this as well?
Absolutely, and that's always a problem. It's a problem in every high-profile case. It was a problem in the O.J. Simpson case, in the Jodi Arias case. Every case there's problems with poisoning the jury pool, or getting the jury pool on your side, and lawyers try to affect it to their benefit. The bottom line is, when you're picking juries, even if it's a high profile case, you're going to find people who say, I never even really heard of this case. Now, hard to believe, but and then you got to watch out for jurors that lie to you to get on the jury because they want to vote one way or another. And believe it or not, that happens a lot.
Does that happen more when it's such a high profile case, when it's so public?
They want to be famous. They want, they want to write a book. They want the interviews afterwards. And, if they're the deciding vote, or the vote that turned it into a hung jury, or whatever it is their agenda is, that they relish in the moment. And you got to really work to try to weed those people out.
That's a very good point, but obviously also very unfortunate. The jury, the prosecution, the defense also trying to make sure that does not happen. I do want to ask you, because we know, and you mentioned, hearsay will be allowed in this preliminary hearing. Evidence will be presented. Between now and the actual trial, will there be any other evidence? Can that still come about? Any other witnesses or evidence? Can there be changes between now and then?
Oh, absolutely. That happens all the time, because you don't know what you don't know. So if a witness pops up somewhere for the defense or the prosecution, I mean, their deadlines for disclosing witnesses and disclosing evidence, and it's not all before the preliminary hearing. There's plenty of time to flesh this case out.
Plenty of time. All right, Dwane, anything else we're missing? Because 5 days is long, somewhat unusual. What else do you have for us?
I'd be surprised if it goes the full 5 days. I mean, attorneys make estimates, and we generally estimate longer than we think it's going to take, because last thing we want to do is be out of time. So, but it's going to be a barn burner, and it's good that the public gets to see what happens.
Yeah, it's so very true. Live streamed, and we'll have it full coverage here on Live Now from Fox as well over the next 5 days, and then whenever the trial commences. Dwane, thank you again. Appreciate your time here on Live Now.
Thanks for having me on.